I want to provide a disclaimer. My gaming career started on PC, and it is still my preferred way to experience games. However, just like a person that's a fan of Italian food can also be a fan of a good old burger, I'm also a huge fan of console gaming. Or rather, I used to be. I still love my little collection of retro consoles, which includes several Sega, Nintendo, and Sony systems, but a lot of the reasons why I love these devices seems to not have carried over to modern systems. Apart from the fact that some games are only released on console and not PC, the only real reasons why anyone would want to own a console over a PC would probably be the following. It was cheaper, more convenient, more reliable, and sometimes the games ran better than they would have on PC. All of these reasons that used to be true, but aren't anymore. So let's go through each of these points. It was cheaper. Obviously, people will point out that, well, it should be cheaper today because of the change from physical media to digital sales that reduce costs now that publishing and shipping of physical media no longer need to be factored in the final cost of distribution. Plus the inclusion of seasonal discounts through the likes of product key distributors and Steam sales. But it goes much further than even that. One of the best eras for affordable console gaming was during the 6th generation. Now, even though I'm from South Africa, I did, however, live in the United States for a full year between 2002 and 2003. And this was when buying a new system was priced anywhere between $199 to only $99. And on top of that, there were many stores that would reduce the price of games that had been on store shelves for as short a time as just a few months. In fact, I didn't pay for a new game that cost more than $29.99. And these weren't shovelware titles. Much of the stuff I got were the heavy hitters. Even though at the time I only got a Nintendo GameCube, mostly because it cost $50 less than the PS2 or Xbox, the price of games for those other systems were pretty much the same. Now, make no mistake, there were still some of those titles that remained $49 or $59.99 for quite a long time, but that was where the secondhand market became that final lifeline that we all so desperately needed. There's some games that get a physical release that make the secondhand market a viable route, but that's assuming that not only the game in its entirety is in fact stored on that disc or game card you just purchased, but that it isn't also tied to an activation key that can only be used once. And yes, this is also the case when it comes to modern PC gaming, but at least the PC has the courtesy of letting me choose where I can get my games. There are so many ways to find good deals, but if Sony, as an example, doesn't offer a good deal, then because of the nature of the closed ecosystem of the PlayStation, if the publisher doesn't offer a discount, I don't have any other choice but to pay full price, apart from not purchasing the game altogether. Maybe a few years down the line the game will go on sale, but this lack of choice leads me into my next point. Consoles used to be more convenient. Apart from the abundance of options of acquiring games through the aforementioned secondhand market or through clearance sales at retailers in their effort to help move their old inventory, borrowing or renting a game was not only possible but very straightforward. And when you got home to your console, you just popped in the disc or cartridge and that was it. You're good to go. Even back in the day, you still needed to go through a few extra steps to play a game on your PC. You had to make sure you had the right type of hardware, the right operating system. You had to first install the game, and still, after all that, it might not run very well, if at all. If you had a PlayStation 2, any game that had the PlayStation 2 logo was going to run with no issues. But today, games very often need to be installed like a PC, and often the game isn't even on the disc or game card, so you will have to download it, which was always slower for many people than it took to copy files from a Blu-ray or flash memory. And this really hasn't gotten better for a lot of people, because even as the bandwidth of the internet increases, so does the size of a typical game. And still, even after all that, it's very likely that you will have to sit through an update that usually isn't optional, making us wonder, why isn't the latest patch included in the initial download? What used to take literally seconds to get into a game now takes minutes, or hours even, depending on the size of the game or how fast your internet was. Problems that used to be unique to only the PC. Consoles used to be reliable, but now they're about the same as a PC, except that when a PC has a problem, often it's easy to fix, as long as you know what component is causing the issue. Having a problem with your RAM? No problem. Issues with your cooler? Not an issue. A faulty GPU? Okay, well that can actually be potentially very expensive, but was still very easy to replace. But a modern console? Forget it. Just trying to get the thing to open can be the first major obstacle for the average user. If you don't have the tools, you'll have to send it in for repair and pray that the company doesn't pull off an Apple by charging the same amount of money comparable to just buying a new one, all because the engineers prioritized slimness over a better heat exchange or a low profile design over longevity. Now, to be fair, I don't want to sound like that older hardware never had similar issues, but with these older systems, I at least could investigate what the problem was, equipped with nothing more than a Phillips screwdriver. But that's just the hardware. I don't know how they made the software worse, but they found a way. Security issues, identity theft, intentionally bricking your system for not using the device that you own in a way they don't want you to. The Nintendo eShop closes? Tough luck. Oh, you want another way to download your digital games that you paid for the next foreseeable future, even after official support drops? Not happening. You guys might think even that type of expectation is unreasonable, but that's exactly what happened when Bethesda closed down their launcher. I could just migrate everything to Steam or to some other game launcher free of charge. A console doesn't have an equivalent to that. And while we're on the subject of Nintendo, did you get a Switch for Christmas, but many of Nintendo's first-party games were delisted? Too bad. And when any of these guys drop support for their hardware, can these games work on their new model with no extra cost? Probably, but mostly no, not really. Whereas when I get a new PC to replace the one I had for 7 years, all of my games will very likely still work. Remember when backwards compatibility wasn't limited on a game-to-game basis, but actually ran pretty much everything? That is until hardware-based backwards compatibility was replaced with software-based emulation that can work really well in the right conditions, but not with everything. The end of life for consoles didn't used to be an issue, because as long as you had a working system with physical games, you could still play them. But with modern systems, if you don't have your entire library of games stored on your device that hopefully will never break or malfunction, then sure, I guess, but good luck with that. Those games are hanging from a thread. Anything goes wrong, that's the end of that. Especially when one realizes that most people don't have all their games installed on one system due to limited storage, especially how big games have gotten in the last few years. Suddenly that 1 terabyte of storage doesn't sound as much as it first seemed. Fortunately, some consoles do let you upgrade, but that's not the point. What happens when your drive dies? How are you going to move those games over to a new system when the service is down? Is that it? Your whole library is gone? So you might as well just give up. And I think a lot of developers and publishers are fine with that. They just don't care. What a waste. Hashtag stop killing games. And finally, consoles used to run games better. Let's just quickly tackle the elephant in the room. Obviously, if you buy more expensive components for your PC, it will undoubtedly be better than the console. But I'm mostly talking about the performance to price ratio. Consoles were unbeatable in this department. I remember when trying to run Need for Speed Underground on my Pentium 4 using a newer, more capable GPU than what the PS2 had under its hood. And yet that game just ran better than on my PC. And years later, when I got a Core 2 Duo system with a GeForce 8800 GT, had experienced stutter with certain games more than some of the stuff developers were releasing in the later years of the PS3 and Xbox 360. Like, how is that even possible? The PS3 only had something comparable to a 7800 GT, while the 360 was using a less powerful, less efficient PowerPC based CPU. By 2011 to 2012, it seemed like newer games were running the same as games from 2008 or 2009 on console, and yet my PC that on paper was more powerful got worse performance as the years went on. Games used to be so optimized on 7th gen consoles. Even the Wii was doing things it had no right at pulling off. But this wasn't unusual if we go further back in history. I would sometimes forget while playing the 4th Ridge Racer on the original PlayStation that this was running on hardware initially released in 1994. In 1994, the best looking game on PC was like Doom 2 or something. Sure, I guess you could purchase a more expensive CPU, but did that CPU only cost as little as the PlayStation's $299? Console games just kept getting better and better as developers were squeezing more power out of the system than what was initially thought possible. The aforementioned Ridge Racer 4 came with a bonus disc that had a demo of the first Ridge Racer that used an updated engine that ran at twice the resolution and twice the frame rate than the original release as a flex from Namco to show how much better they've gotten at utilizing the PS1 hardware. But now, again, with modern consoles, games and often their engines are so unoptimized they don't seem to run any better than a similarly priced PC. So if the console doesn't offer a better gaming experience than the competition, then why should I even own one? Now, a lot of the problems that modern consoles have are not limited to just consoles. PCs have had these problems for a very long time now, except there are still some things mentioned so far in this video that a PC still doesn't suffer from. So what exactly do consoles have over the PC? Is it portability with the likes of the Switch? Well, not anymore. Is it convenience? No, not anymore. Reliability? Quality? Cost? Again, not anymore. That's the problem. The issue isn't that the PC is so much better than consoles in those examples, because a lot of the time it wasn't. The issue is that most of the shortcomings of the PC just didn't carry over to consoles in the first place. They used to be so much better. Decades ago, the only reason why someone would choose a PC over something like a Nintendo 64, Sega Dreamcast, or the first Xbox was probably because that person needed it to do more than just play games. Maybe someone needed it for work. And if you did buy a PC that really was just for playing games, you were probably playing games that either just didn't translate well to consoles, or maybe they weren't even released on console, or maybe you wanted to push graphics even further than a typical gaming system of the time was capable of, regardless of cost. Obviously, one of the major reasons why someone would want to purchase a particular system is probably for the exclusives, those games that did not get a PC release. Now, even though this was a lot more prevalent in the past, not so much today. Most of the stuff that gets a console release does in fact get a PC release. You might have to wait a little while, but eventually it does happen. Well, I mean, there's a lot of Nintendo games that won't see a PC release, at least not officially. PCs had certain advantages over consoles, but consoles also had some of its own benefits. But in recent history, what advantages do they have over a well-rounded personal computer? They now have all of its flaws, but this time with none of the advantages. If you guys think I'm bashing console fans, I'm not. I totally get the excitement of buying a next generation gaming system, where it feels like there are endless possibilities just over the horizon. I'm not disrespecting these fans. I just feel really bad for them. I feel like Sony and Nintendo have just lost the plot, and why Microsoft seems to be pulling out of this market altogether. I'm just so sick of their garbage, and that is why I stopped buying consoles. Until next time.